here to talk about the best games released in 2014
So far.
Tom McShea, Carolyn Pettit, and Justin Haywald.
Yes.
We've got a bunch of games to talk about today, but you folks are on to talk about 3 in particular. First of all, a DLC pack?
Yeah, so we're starting with kind of a weird one. We're going to start by talking about The Last of Us Left Behind, and it may or may not, be
does this
eligible
count? Yeah.
for the actual Game of the Year award that GameSpot gives at the end of this year. But we wanted to talk about it. Tom and I think in particular, are big champions of this game because we just think that it's one of the greatest achievements of the year so far.
It is just remarkable storytelling. I don't know, a lot of people haven't really gotten around to it yet, I've noticed.
Me included, actually.
They might be waiting for, Last of Us PS4 is coming out this month. So, but it's fleshes out the story and the character, Ellie, who's one of the best characters ever, just in a way that the main game wasn't quite able to do.
Right. So, the core game, The Last of Us, I think, is an excellent example of like really traditional kind of AAA action adventure game design, where you play through a section and then there's like story cutscenes, and then you play through another section. There's more cutscenes. Part of what makes Left Behind, I think, so brilliant is the way that it uses the gameplay mechanics that you kind of get familiar with throughout The Last of Us in different ways to build up the feeling you have as the player of this bond between Ellie and her friend Riley. And so it just kind of, rather than using stealth to like hide from clickers or the things you did in the normal game, it's like now you're playing a game of hide and seek with your friend, or tossing bricks at cars. It's this like moment of bonding. And the it's also important to just say that the quality of the writing in this is truly exceptional as far as games writing goes.
Well, from a Sony exclusive to a Nintendo exclusive, Mario Kart 8 came out last month. It was almost the soundtrack of our office for about 2 weeks as Tom, you were playing it.
Oh yeah.
People were getting involved in it. Some people think, just another Mario Kart. Why do you think this might be one of the best games released this year?
You can make a strong case that this is the best Mario Kart ever from a pure racing perspective.
Okay.
You could not make a strong case that that's not true. Meaning this is just the best pure racer Nintendo has made or published since F-Zero, basically, which was a while ago, because there's nothing else in this game except for racing. There's no like challenges or anything which we've seen in other games like the DS version. But they nailed the moment-to-moment feel of driving so much, and they nailed the course design. Yeah. And it's really just a masterpiece in that regard of they understood how to make driving really fun and balanced.
And on top of that, I think it's also worth noting that the design, the visual design of the game is just so vibrant and so beautiful.
It feels so satisfying to get in first if you're behind someone, because you earned it. And I really love that.
The blue shell in other games has always been so ridiculously overpowered, and in this game they give you the power to overcome that. There's an item specifically where you sound a horn, and that will repel the blue shell as it comes to attack you. And some people have also found that you're able to boost if you boost just right at the right time.
We are obviously doing Game of the Month here at GameSpot.com. Some of these games that we're going to talk about today have won Game of the Month. Some haven't, because some months are stronger than others.
Yeah.
Our most recent one was Shovel Knight.
I only actually scratched the surface of it, and immediately it just felt like to me like it could have been a classic, NES game. If this were a game that actually come out on the NES, because it captures kind of that Mega Man or just side-scrolling feel, but it also has this kind of world map thing, these villages you go into that are very reminiscent of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, and so it takes all of these familiar elements from those games, but it pulls them off so well that it's just wonderful to return to them.
It's like if people were still making NES games, this is the game that they would have made. This is the natural evolution extension of that mindset.
Is there something different then about, because you can say that remakes of old NES games could be something quite trite, or what is it about this? Is this more than just a simple homage? Is it actually something that feels like it could have been released then?
That's actually the beauty of it. Is this doesn't have anything else to it, like Super Time Force.
Okay.
One of the other great games of the year, that couldn't have been made. That's completely new and inventive with the time mechanic. But this really is just old school. This is what NES games were, but it's a really good version of what NES games were.
We're here to talk about the best games released in 2014. Very happy to be joined by Tom McShea, Kevin Van Ord, and Sean McInnes. Gentlemen, there are a lot of good games came out this year. One of the ones that I have on my list, only came out last week. In fact, Kevin, you were on this very show playing it. Divinity Original
Yeah.
Sin. So I guess you like it then.
It's really, really,
Really?
good.
Really?
And it's really, really long.
Oh wow! Just for
Yeah.
a moment, what is it
totally.
about this game that thinks it could be a contender for best game of the year?
Oh, the combat's really good. Number one, it's got turn-based combat. Like it's like from Temple of Elemental Evil kind of was way back in the day, except not broken.
Okay.
So
That's good to know.
that's really good. The exploration's really neat. There's quests everywhere you go. There's something to do. And the interesting thing is the game doesn't hold your hand for any of this stuff. Like there are no real, every so often like a waypoint type thing will appear, but typically no waypoints. There's lots of different ways to solve quests depending on how you go about things. Sometimes you can talk your way out. It has this cool rock, paper, scissors system when you have two characters talking to each other.
Okay.
And but that in itself is sort of based on their stats for like, I'm gonna try to out-charm you, oh, I'm gonna try to out-intimidate you, so we're gonna do rock, paper, scissors to, and sometimes you do that against like enemies, and suddenly it's like, oh, I don't have to fight these dudes. They're like, oh, I charmed my way into their lair, and I don't know.
Usually when
like,
someone has a lair, you don't have to do much charming to get in there.
well, you
They're
know,
the one
I-
trying to get you into
Yeah.
their lair.
I magicked my way into that lair.
I want to talk about another game that involves digging up bones. Wolfenstein.
Wolfenstein:
New
New Order.
Yeah. Have you played that?
I have played. I really enjoyed Wolfenstein,
I only-
or Wolfie Times, as we call it in this office.
I only started playing Wolfie Times on Saturday. It's fun so far, but why is it one of the best games released this year?
What I really like about it is that it's a game it's very aware of its own place in history. It's respectful of the Wolfenstein tradition. It embraces that kind of stuff, but it doesn't find itself like anchored down by it. Like it actually it pulls off this balancing act between the bombast and the machismo of like a vintage shooter from the 90s, but it's also a game with a very interesting story and very like BJ Blazkowicz is a great character in this game, which is not something that I was expecting in the least.
Yeah.
Like this game does it does downtime really well. Like very often you spend time between missions in the
A hub world or something like a.
it's not a hub world. It's like a resistance hideout in
Okay.
the middle of Berlin, and it's like you just linger there for a little while, and you hang out with these other resistance fighters, and you kind of see how they spend time, you know, in the resistance. It's really really impressive, and that's part of what I really love about BJ Blazkowicz as a character in this game is that he's a really interesting character, but he's not like a guy who's like weighed down by his own dark past.
Yeah.
He's not like tormented by his own like inner turmoil. He's a guy who, as one of your side characters remarks, he was born to kill Nazis.
Great. Speaking of Wolfie Times, Mary, edit it later. The Wolf Among Us. Why is that?
Yeah,
Why is
yeah,
that one of the best
totally.
games that's out this year? Because
I think overall, even though I was a little disappointed with the finale, I think overall it is really one of those things where the journey was totally worth it. It wasn't really about the destination, especially because the way it ends, you might want to then go back and replay stuff.
Okay.
Which is not something that I usually like to do with a Telltale type game, because I feel like, okay, I've had my story. I don't want to mess with that story by like poking into the other possibilities, because then it's just like kind of pulling the curtain and seeing the wizard for me. So, but it's really good. I think the third episode is actually the highlight.
Third
for me.
episode, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Cool.
I would say definitely, especially because the world is just really interesting and
so
it got me
good.
into the comics.